Good evening, and welcome to this live telephone town hall with your state lawmakers, House Speaker Lori Jenkins, Representative Jake Fye, and Senator Yasmin Trudeau. My name is Jen, and I'll be moderating tonight. We're calling you tonight because your 27th District lawmakers want to answer your questions about the recently concluded legislative session in Olympia. To ask a question, all you need to do is press *3 on your phone, and you will be placed in the question queue. Again, we're calling you tonight for a live town hall with your state lawmakers, Speaker Lori Jenkins, Representative Jake Fye, and Senator Yasmin Trudeau. If you have a question, please press *3 at this time. And now I'm going to turn it over to the legislators for some opening remarks.
Well, I guess I'll start since I was introduced first. This is Speaker Lori Jenkins. It's great to have all of you on the line tonight. We're looking forward to answering your questions. We did do a live town hall meeting in February, and we're really glad to catch up with you by doing this one by telephone tonight. I just want to remind you again to please press *3 if you have a question. I have been serving the 27th Legislative District since 2011, have served on many committees while doing that, but in 2020 I was elected Speaker of the House, and so now serve as Speaker and don't serve on committees particularly anymore, but am responsible for managing the whole of the House of Representatives. I will just start off with a little brag on the legislature and note that we had a very short 60-day session this year. In even-numbered years like this, we have 60-day sessions, and in odd-numbered years, we have 105-day sessions. Those odd-numbered years are the years that we do the whole biennial budget, and then in these short sessions, we just do smaller supplemental budgets. We were still pretty aggressive this year in terms of what we were able to accomplish in a 60-day session. You'll hear more about that as we move forward. But we did pass 370 bills this legislative session. It's always important for me to point out to people that we are not like the other Washington. 80% of the bills that we passed had wide bipartisan support, and a large number of those actually had, I think in the 70% range, were unanimously supported by members. So we do really great bipartisan work, and that's one of the reasons it's great to serve in the legislature. I'm looking forward, again, to answering your questions, but I will pass it on to Representative Fye for him to tell you a little bit about what he's been doing.
I'm Representative Jake Fye, been in the legislature for 12 years, the last 6 years as chair of the House Transportation Committee. It's great to have this number of people attending. And I also serve on the Environment and Energy Committee, and very interested in hearing from you. And I'll pass it to Senator Trudeau.
Thank you so much. Yasmin Trudeau here. I've had the honor and privilege of representing the 27th Legislative District, first when I was appointed in 2021 and then elected in 2022. It remains my honor to do this work. I serve on a couple of different committees. I serve as the vice chair of the Senate's Law and Justice Committee, which is the equivalent to the Public Safety and Judiciary committees that operate in the House. I also serve on the Energy, Environment, and Technology Committee, so counterpart to Representative Fye's House Committee in the Senate. I serve on the Housing Committee, and I serve as one of the two Democratic negotiators on the state's capital budget, which basically is infrastructure that is not in transportation. So think schools, parks, behavioral health facilities, et cetera. So just happy, and thank you all in advance for your questions and for engaging today.
All right, we are starting to get some questions coming in. As a reminder, folks who are listening in, this is a live telephone town hall with your state lawmakers. If you have a question, please press *3 on your phone, and we'll get you right over into the queue. So we're going to start off with Rita. Rita has a question about homelessness. Go ahead, Rita.
If we have already sunk so much money into the homeless crisis, why are our streets littered with more homeless and more environmentally unfriendly individuals that continue to cost us money in law enforcement, in our environmental cleanup, and for our business owners. What are you doing for the business owners to clean it up so that we can continue to do business and the small towns and the small communities can operate small businesses with the homeless crisis getting worse and worse every single day?
I'm happy to start unless either one of my seatmates want to jump in. I want to start by just acknowledging, what I'm hearing from you. I think I can speak for my seatmates as well in saying that we are continuing to be very concerned about what is happening, what we can do all as a community to address what we see as absolutely a crisis in not just homelessness, but in housing as well, which is contributing to that issue with behavioral health and other places that the state has really stepped up and invested in the last couple of sessions. But, what I can't speak to local jurisdictions and what they choose to fund and prioritize. We can really talk about what we've done at the state level. And I know that Representative Fye has done a lot of really great work. But I would offer to you that you probably shouldn't trust anyone with a silver bullet on this issue, because there are a lot of folks that are really trying hard to work on solutions, but they are comprehensive and they are going to take all hands on deck, including local jurisdictions in the state, and that's where we're planning to partner. So happy to comment on any specific policies, but they don't really fit into a response that I can give you in this moment unless there's a specific bill or issue. I don't know if Rep. Fye or Speaker Jenkins want to add to that.
I can maybe comment since Senator Trudeau mentioned that I have been working on this issue as it relates really to state highways. And in fact, we have upped our investments in taking care of encampments while providing housing for people who have been living on our state highways or near our state highways. And in particular, we have provided additional money in cooperation with the city of Tacoma and the city of Fife over $1.5 million to work with them to pay for increased pickup of materials, and also to assist the city of Tacoma and the city of Fife with being able to help house people who are able to make that transition to housing.
I just wanted to add one other quick thing in here. We did invest specifically for the city of Tacoma $3 million to prevent the closure of over 300 temporary and emergency shelter beds. One of the things Senator Trudeau alluded to was that not all jurisdictions handle housing and homelessness in the same way. It turns out that the city of Tacoma provides 80% of the shelter beds in Pierce County. Not every other community is addressing homelessness the way it should be. And so that means that, and there are a lot of services in Tacoma for folks who are unhoused. So that drives people here in a way. But that's why the entire Pierce County delegation was supportive of adding this funding so that we didn't shut down shelter beds in Tacoma. But we need other jurisdictions within Pierce County to pick up and start doing their part, too, to help out with homelessness.
Thank you. I actually realized after that we had all worked so hard on that shelter bed funding, and I really appreciate the speaker stepping in. I know that the part of the question was alluding to the costs, and unfortunately, services do cost, and so there is cost associated. But I wanted to offer that there's also a decision that governments at all levels are grappling with, which is the Martin v. Boise decision, which means you can't actually move people without having adequate shelter options in place, which is going to cost money. And that's we now have to follow the law as set by the Ninth Circuit. So I wanted to offer that I understand that might not be what folks want to hear, but it is going to require continued funding for reasons that are outside of our control and that are within our control for what we see is going to help to resolve the problem.
All right. We are going to move on to the next question. And as a reminder, if you have a question for your state lawmakers, please press *3 on your phone. We're now going to take a question from Sophia. She has a question about immigration issues. Go ahead, Sophia.
Hi. My question was about, my question was just about what kind of bills have been passed or have been introduced in this last session that had to do with immigration, whether that be about the Northwest Immigration Detention Center or just pathways to citizenship. My name is Sophia, and I'm involved with the HDCC, so I also just wanted to say hi.
Thanks for that question, Sophia. This is Speaker Jenkins, and I'll start off with that one. The Northwest Detention Center is an enigma to us. We have passed legislation the last number of years, one that would have closed the detention center down in 2025 that was struck down by the federal court, and then another piece of legislation that would have allowed more inspections from the health department and other state agencies, and that the group that runs the detention center is sued over that, and we have not fared well in the court system on those attempts either. Although that case is not finished yet, so we'll see where it ends up. But that's been very frustrating to us because we do feel at least as though even if it's a federal issue there, that we ought to be able to have local inspections happen and make sure that they are following local laws in regard to treatment of people. So we'll keep on. We're trying to be very creative and doing everything that we can. As you probably are aware, immigration is really a federal issue more than a state issue, but we have done a lot of work to make sure, for example, that undocumented folks do have access to health care. We've also provided significant funding for naturalization services and to assist asylum seekers and refugees as they arrive here in Washington. So there's a fair amount of funding there. One of the other things that we are working on, especially in the healthcare realm, is making it easier for immigrants who come to Washington State who have licensure to practice healthcare and other things, teaching, other professions in their home countries, to be able to get licensed here in Washington State to do that kind of care. We have a shortage of workforce in all of those areas, and this is a real opportunity for us to be able to expand workforce. That's taking some work to happen, but I think that will happen. We'll see some work happen on that over the next couple of years.
All right. As a reminder, if you have a question, please press *3 on your phone. We're now going to go to Ryan. Ryan has a question about what you're doing when you're not in session. Go ahead, Ryan.
Hi. I was hoping you folks could talk about what legislators do to research issues while you're not actively in session. Just briefly, I operate a chain of driving schools in the state, and for us, sometimes the proposed legislation related to drivers just kind of seems to pop up as the session begins. I wonder, does research come into this before, and is that something we should reach out to you with our concerns? And second follow-up, it'll be an easy one. What method do you prefer constituents use to reach out to you? Thanks very much.
I can speak to this a little bit. So actually, I spend quite a bit of time on transportation issues, and when we're not in session, we have a joint transportation committee made of Senate and House transportation members that meet monthly when we're not in session, and there's a lot of meetings that things come up in transportation all the time. It's very typical for me to spend a few hours most days on transportation issues. You can get a hold of our office. If you go to the legislative website, it'll have our phone numbers and our email addresses. But if you have a specific thing about driver's education, I'd be happy to chat with you about it. I'm already working on some other pieces of the legislation for next session. as are many legislators.
I can add to that. I think it depends on the legislator's circumstances. I'd say for many of us, we have to continue working outside jobs because we have a part-time legislature. I know the speaker works at a separate job. I know Representative Fye has before he was able to retire in his other position. And so I think it really depends in terms of that availability, and would just put a plug in for a full-time legislature in the future, because I think it does create some challenges, especially for folks. I have a part-time job that I'm able to have. I also have 2 small children. And so my engagement, I'm really lucky to have good people that support me, really great staff that do the work. But I would say for this entire delegation, we try to make ourselves as available as possible. If you follow any of our social media accounts, we do community coffee chats. We do them around the district and try to be accessible as possible during the interim. And please do reach out. The question about whether you should reach out, I tell everyone I speak with, now is the time to start doing that outreach, because oftentimes we also don't get presented issues until it's like November or December, and we're scrambling to do effective outreach when people from the community come and ask us to move forward or to put forward an issue. So it actually goes in both directions and is incredibly helpful. But I can't speak to folks in other districts. I know that the 3 of us have the value of making ourselves as accessible as possible and doing as much of that work before session starts, but it's definitely a 2-way street. So please do reach out, and look forward to corresponding.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Ryan. This is Lori Jenkins answering. But I think for me, emailing my office is the best way to get a hold of me, because, one, you can outline the issue. And so sometimes we have great staff in the House and Senate, and sometimes I can send that on to them to do research before we actually sit down and meet. Or they might just be able to call you back and respond to the question that you have. Other times you're suggesting legislation, and they can kind of help on that, and then we can reach back out to you and schedule a meeting. So I just think email is very, very helpful, but you can also call. The other thing I suggest is signing up for our electronic newsletters. All 3 of us have them. Just note that when this is an election year, so sometime in May we won't be able to send any more electronic newsletters from our legislative offices until after the election. So there will be a lot of downtime there, but during session we have those. I definitely believe that you should contact us during the interim. People think, get a hold of them during session. Well, during session, we are sprinting just a little bit faster than we can actually run. And that's not the best time to have a deep conversation about something. So now, as Senator Trudeau said, now is a great time to get a hold of us.
All right. We're going to take the next question. As a reminder, if you have a question for your state lawmakers, press *3 on your phone. Our next question is from Dawn. Dawn has a question about mental health access. Go ahead, Dawn. Dawn, are you there? Next question from Dawn about mental health. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello. I was just wondering what is being done to expand mental health care, especially for hospitalization. Thank you.
Dawn, that's a great question. I'm very excited because in June we are going to be opening up a behavioral health teaching hospital in Seattle. It'll be in Seattle, but it's going to have, I can't remember how many beds, but at least 75 beds for treatment. But it's associated with the University of Washington, so it will also be training behavioral health care providers, which we have a huge shortage of. So we passed this bill a couple years ago, and it's taken a couple years to get this hospital online, but it should be opening its doors in June. The other thing that I've been working in the behavioral health field for really most of a decade, maybe over a decade now. And it's been very, very frustrating because the number of beds we have brought on every year just has not met the needs. I've been very excited, though, to see that for the first time we won't have all the inpatient beds we need by the end of this biennium, but we are projected to have all the beds that we need, that we might need by the end of next biennium. Now, those projections may change, but we're now at least being able to start seeing a real flow of beds, and this is because we have taken sites as different sites have closed around the state. The state of Washington has purchase those sites. They might be inpatient sites for other kinds of health care. We've purchased those. We've transitioned them into behavioral health treatment centers. We are building a forensic hospital out on the Western State Hospital campus. We have used some juvenile detention facilities and redesigned those to provide behavioral health. So I don't want to lead you to believe that everything is perfect. It is not. But we are getting closer to getting to the space that we need for behavioral health beds. The last thing I want to say about this, though, is that is the last thing we really want. We want people to be able to get treatment in their community, in outpatient, before things get so bad that they need inpatient treatment. And the way we go about doing that has really been through making sure that we fund community behavioral health much better than we were funding. And we, in our budgets over the last 2 biennia, it's mostly related actually to payment for counselors and salaries for people who are doing this outpatient treatment. And it has, I have heard from Comprehensive Mental Health that it has really helped in their retention here in Pierce County. So I'm pleased with the work we're doing. We got a long way to go, but we are definitely moving in the right direction.
All right. Our next question comes from Luke. Luke has a question about the public defense system. Go ahead, Luke.
Hello. My question relates to the public defense structure system, and I was hearing that there was legislation around caseloads for public defense in the state. So I was just wondering what the date was on that legislation. Thanks.
So I'm actually just looking, because there was a number of policy bills that were put forward to address this issue. So I'm looking for the specific one to respond to your question. But I'd say, in addition to the one that you highlighted, there were also bills introduced to help with the recruitment of both public defenders and of prosecutors across the state. We actually recognized, and through the collaboration of the Office of Public Defense and the Washington Association of Prosecuting Attorneys, there was collaboration on a number of bills that were put forward to address this. So I might just kick it over to my other seatmate to do a little Google on the outcome of those 3 bills, because I know there were a couple changes in them, which is why I want to make sure I'm answering accurately. But I'd say that we recognize and fully understand that we've got a problem here. I know Speaker Jenkins, in her former role as chair of the Judiciary Committee in the House, is certainly familiar and has worked closely with the Office of Public Defense, as have I now as the Vice Chair of Law and Justice. And we also, the other one is to address barriers like student loan repayment programs and other things that folks are finding it really hard to get into public service law in the first place. So let me kick it over to one of my seatmates and see if I can find you the a specific answer, if I can put the bill number real quick.
While Senator Trudeau's looking for that, I'll just note a couple of things. One, the rule that you talked about, that you mentioned, Luke, was a rule adopted by, I believe, either the Bar Association or the state Supreme Court in terms of caseloads. It is very true that our public defenders their caseloads are much too high. But when we budget, that decision came out after we finish session this year. So this will be an issue that we grapple with probably a lot more next year. The other thing that's been going on is 3 of the smaller counties in the state have actually sued the state around public defense. That case is in litigation right now. I think that case is going to help us figure out how we work our way through funding for public defense. Because they're the 3 smallest counties, they're not the most representative for us as we start to work with the counties on what's needed. You may be aware, for example, that in Oregon, their constitution is a little bit different than ours, but they have a huge lawsuit, much like our K-12 school funding case in Oregon. It's about public defense. going on down there. So we're also a little bit in touch down there with how they're looking at funding. So I would say probably doing more in a bigger way, look for the next biennial budget to help us with that. And I don't know, Senator Trudeau may have found what she's looking for there.
I did, thank you. So there were 3 bills introduced. The one that did pass the legislature was Senate Bill 5780, which expands training opportunities for folks going into public defense, and then was revised to encourage both public defense and prosecution. So it does a number of things that I'm happy to go into more detail, but if you wanted to take a look at our legislative website, it's 5780, and we have a nice bill report that's available if folks want to see.
All right. We will move on to the next question. And as a reminder, if you have a question for your state lawmakers, please press *3. Our next question comes from Joe. Joe has a question about cars on the road with expired tabs. Go ahead, Joe.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. I want to know how come we have no police patrols on the road. We've got cars with no license plates, no bumpers, no windows that are taped up, no lights. They're speeding like crazy. And our car insurance, for those of us that keep our cars registered and updated, is going higher and higher because of all of this. And I want to know why they're not doing anything, plus the extreme speeds that are on all of the roads all over. I have a 25-mile-an-hour road in front of my house, and the average speed at night is 60. And it's a narrow road. I've almost been hit trying to back into my driveway.
Thank you for your question. This is Representative Fye. There's a number of factors that I would like to share with you about the situation. I'll start with the personal one. In the last year, I've been in 2 accidents caused by the other driver. Was not at fault at all, but obviously when there's accidents like that, insurance rates tend to go up because of the cost of being able to fix those cars. So, but I think your question is obviously broader than that. Let's try to talk about a couple of other factors here. One is we have now hit, in the last 2 years, record numbers of fatalities on our highways in the state of Washington, over 800, which is a very sad situation. We have instituted some policies to try to address that through photo enforcement in construction zones, giving authority to local jurisdictions to do photo enforcement as well on identified areas where they have a lot of accidents. In addition, we have a shortage of at least state troopers, but I think most law enforcement agencies are short-staffed. Why are we short? Part of the reason we're short is baby boomers are retiring from the system. In the next 2 years, we expect 150 state troopers to be eligible for retirement. We passed a bill this session to try to encourage troopers to stay beyond their eligibility date for retirement so that they would be able to keep some of our troopers longer than what otherwise would be the case. So I've noticed, and I think a lot of other people notice, I'm not sure quite, I'm not a psychologist, so I don't quite understand it, but we've seen a dramatic increase in reckless and speeding since the pandemic. And maybe that was because there weren't as many people on the road and people felt they could go faster. But we have a serious problem with drivers. We're trying to do, I'll just mention one more thing that we're trying to do is to move to a system where we will require young drivers to go through driver's training before they can get their license. That's not the case right now. If you're age 18, as long as you can pass the exam, you can be eligible to get your driver's license. So we're trying to address it, but certainly the staffing issue is going to take some time to get people through training and provide incentives for people to go to work for the State Patrol or other law enforcement agencies. But thank you for the very good question.
All right. Please press *3 on your phone if you have a question for your state lawmakers. We're now going to take a question from Margarita. Margarita has a question about natural gas availability. Go ahead, Margarita.
Oh, hello. I just would like to know, I know this is going to be difficult and extensive, so I would like to know just when exactly everyone have to transition their home from gas heat to electric. Is there going to be a year when this is absolutely has to be done?
So I'll try this, and I'll let maybe Senator Yasmeen Trudeau jump in with what I might not mention. So the legislation was passed this year, allows Puget Sound Energy to consider, because they're both a gas and electric utility, to do planning for both fuels together. This has not been the case, I don't think, anywhere in the country with dual fuel utilities. So they are going to go through a process with the Utilities and Transportation Commission so that they can look at both natural gas and electricity and do their best to plan for moving towards electricity from natural gas because it tends to be a cheaper fuel. And it obviously has also the benefit of not being a carbon-related generation tool. So but this all takes a bit of time. And especially in the case of the individual consumer, no one's going to force you to change from natural gas to electricity. There will be programs that Puget Sound Energy will have that will facilitate that in terms of helping pay for the costs of changing heating systems. But the intention is not to have people be required to move off of natural gas to electricity.
I just wanted to add, we passed House Bill 1589, which is actually a transition plan. So what it does is it allows the Puget Sound Energy to be given the tools, the public comment period, the ability to collaborate and figure out how it is that we actually make this transition over. I think to Rep. 5's point, there is no hard ban. There are codes with the Building Code Council. I would say to reach out to the Building Code Council if you have specific concerns about some of the codes that they've put out. That isn't really within the state legislature's purview, but we wanted to make sure that as this transition was happening, that it was a guided transition, that PSE has to consider the cost of electrification against the cost of maintaining gas infrastructure and making sure that they're working with the Utilities and Transportation Commission to do so. So if you're curious about just building off what Rep. 5 offered, House Bill 1589, but there has been a lot of misinformation about that bill, including that there's going to be an impending natural gas ban, and just wanted to emphasize that that is not correct.
All right. If you have a question for your state lawmakers, please press *3. We're now going to take a question from Ken. Ken has a question about middle housing and density. Go ahead, Ken.
Hi, and thank you very much for taking my phone call. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Ken.
Oh, okay.
We can hear you.
Okay. My question to the legislators, when you passed HB 1110 and 1337, one of the key components of that is the expansion of the density in the parcels around the state. Unfortunately, that expansion is going to push the standard family home outside the federal lending system, where people can get conventional loans, FHA, VA, USDA loans. So like in the city of Tacoma, they're moving forward. Almost every home inside the city of Tacoma, once they implement their current proposed plan, will no longer be eligible for funding. They are literally going to be pushed out of the federal lending system. I came to you guys a little while ago. I'd still like to somehow or another figure out, are you guys going to go back and revisit that density issue, or are you going to wait until the federal government steps in and literally stops funding the housing market here in the state? I mean, we're talking trillions of dollars here. Okay, thank you.
Well,
Thank you. And I appreciate that. This Senator Trudeau. And I remember having a discussion with you actually after our town hall on this. And it's just a reminder to me that you and I need to sit down and chat, because I have taken a look at other jurisdictions that have implemented increased density, and I've not found this to be the case. But if there's more information that we should be aware of, I'm happy to hear it. But I don't think it would change right now is one thing that I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the homelessness crisis, is that we have a lack of housing. Right now, I think the stat is 1 million homes short for meeting the current demand. There are numbers that are far higher than that. So we are trying to address many things at once. But I would like to have a follow-up conversation with you to kind of understand what you're seeing in other jurisdictions, because I did go back and ask where other jurisdictions had passed similar policies, and I haven't seen that outcome. So not saying that there isn't something for us to be aware of, but I think it's a good discussion point and would be happy to follow up with you offline.
All right. Please press star 3 if you have a question. Our next question comes from Lisa. Lisa has a question about funding for local arts. Go ahead, Lisa.
I would just like to ask what the legislature is doing regarding supporting the arts in our area. I think that it's not a frivolous question. I think the arts are central to the health of a community. So if you can tell me what's going on there, I really appreciate it. I do sit on the Tacoma Art Museum board, and I'd like to report back to my fellow board members.
Sure, Lisa. I'm happy to start here. This is Lori Jenkins. A lot of our investments in the arts in Tacoma are capital budget investments that relate to the construction of arts facilities. So, for example, the Tacoma Art Museum, where you sit as a board member, we funded part of the construction for the museum. This year, we had applications from Tacoma Arts Live, and we actually provided some operating budget funding for them to do some small business incubation related to the arts. But if you look at any arts facility in the city of Tacoma, like the remodel of the Pantages, the seismic upgrades there, we funded those through the state legislature. So there are many, many spots where we're doing that. We also, during the pandemic, invested a significant amount of money because our arts communities were hit very, very hard. So we invested significant amount of money of COVID dollars, federal and state, in making sure that our arts provider organizations could stay healthy as we moved out of the pandemic. And then we have smaller pots of money that are typically invested when, just like I mentioned, Tacoma Arts Live, when someone in the arts community comes and asks a local legislator to help them with things, we try to help with that. There is a small pot of money generally available. But for Tacoma, the biggest thing is that the voters in Tacoma passed the Tacoma Creates Initiative. So when you look at the Tacoma Creates Initiative, that is the primary funder for arts in Tacoma. And frequently, the legislature is matching money that is put in by Tacoma Creates. And we passed some legislation a year ago to let other jurisdictions, namely Seattle, do the same thing that Tacoma did to develop arts funding.
All right. Please press star 3 if you have a question for your state lawmakers. We're now going to go over to Debbie. Debbie has a question about gun bills and education. Go ahead, Debbie.
Hi. First of all, just want to thank you all for doing a great job for Tacoma. And some of my top priorities as a citizen are gun regulation and education. Just wondering what kind of legislation you all might be anticipating seeing next session or in future sessions on those two topics.
Well, I'll be happy to start. It's even though we're working on things right now, I would just say we're only we're not quite a month out from last session, so it's a little bit hard to say what we'll be doing in the future. I do think that one of the challenges that we continue to have in education is we have a regionalization factor that relates to how our K-12 system is funded and how teachers and paraeducators and other folks in the system are paid. And that continues to be a challenging model. It's very technical in nature, but I think that that's something that we're always looking at doing. Whenever we do things in the K-12 system, we're usually talking not about thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Those usually move into the billions of dollars kind of strategies, because we've got 1 million kids in the K-12 system. It's the highest priority for the legislature, and the Constitution says it's our highest priority. So we always look at doing a number of things, but those are some of the things I think about. Special ed continues to be a big issue that we'll work on. Because we have a decrease in enrollments in our K-12 system, you're seeing a number of school districts that are closing schools and things like that. And we want to make sure, we always want to make sure that we're not being overly aggressive there, and that we're maintaining the ability to educate our young people. So those are things that we'll look at. We passed 3 significant pieces of firearm legislation this session, and so I think folks will continue to work on these issues for next session. But one bill requires people to report that their firearm has been lost or stolen within 24 hours of knowing that it has been lost and stolen, mostly because stolen firearms are the primary things that are trafficked or sold illegally or used in violent crimes. So we want law enforcement to know about that. A second bill that was passed, which has been out there for a while, finally allows our Washington State Patrol to destroy firearms that they confiscate. They were not allowed to destroy them, and were required to either save them somewhere, which was becomes an exorbitant cost, or to resell them. And that just does not seem, if what you're trying to do is get guns off the street, it doesn't seem like the smartest thing to do. So this allows them to be destroyed. And then finally, we passed a bill that really deals with sellers of firearms. Most stolen firearms are taken from vehicles, but gun dealers are also at risk of having their inventory robbed, and there's a lot more firearms and ammunition at risk for being stolen in a store. So the bill required dealers to keep their inventory safe and secure, and to standardize their records and report thefts and things like that. So those were the 3 firearm bills that we passed this year. We're, of course, watching the Supreme Court and how they're going to rule on our legislation on assault weapons, or on another state's legislation on assault weapons, because that'll affect us too.
And I just jump in. My brain immediately went to the work that we did this session, because as the speaker mentioned, we are just sort of coming out of session. So thinking ahead, we'll have lots of conversations in the interim with our respective caucuses between, even us as a delegation about what priorities will go forward. So I appreciate that. One of the things I just wanted to highlight is that I've having watched the legislature come such a long way on the topic of education, and really, I think I become more and more nervous about what it means if we're in a position where we don't have the same amount of revenue available to us to tackle this issue. So, we've paid for a lot of the special education funding through capital gains tax and resources, and so it's hard to plan ahead when we also know that there are unknowns about what we have as far as resource to plan ahead with. So those are things that we're all tracking very closely, so we also know what we're working with, and then we can plan the policies accordingly. But I hope that we continue to have the resources available to trend in the right direction and really support all of our students, and just been really proud of the work that's been done on that so far.
All right. Our next question comes from Thomas, and it's a question about rent stabilization. Go ahead, Thomas.
So a couple things. One is want to thank the representatives for your service. It's a thankless job, and I know you guys have great intentions. Second, just wanted to say, I think the work that you guys with housing on helping the supply, some of the barriers to supply have been helpful, and so wanted to compliment you on that as well. The other thing was to acknowledge the fact that there's a significant housing crisis. I mean, it's pretty clear there's not enough housing. But I guess what I have the question about is, I've tried to look pretty carefully, and it seems like of the non-homeowner occupied housing, over 90% of it is private housing providers. And so that's your main partner when it comes to solving the housing crisis. I mean, it's 0.2% of Washington residents that are in public housing, and not too much more in nonprofit. So the private sector is the main partners. And so the thing that I guess is a little hard to understand is with some of the rent control legislation that has been passed in Seattle and has been now in Tacoma, and Seattle is now losing housing because of that legislation. So the rent control that came up in the legislature, is incredibly hostile to a sector that depends on incentive. And if you destroy that incentive, then how, like with $10 late fees, which is no late fee at all, how are you going to keep or increase affordable housing?
I'm happy to lead. So I appreciate that you brought up rent stabilization. I actually was the Senate sponsor of the bill. The bill that was the mover but didn't ultimately pass was a House bill. But I wanted to offer that, what we're talking about in the bill is a percentage for folks to be able to plan for. So I've been a renter my whole life until just a couple of years ago when I became a homeowner, and I realized there's a level of stability in being able to meet your financial obligations when you know what those obligations are. And what we've been seeing across the state is rent increases anywhere from 40 to 70%. In fact, we've had folks show up at our coffee chat that said in 1 year they had 30%, the next year it was a 40% increase. And, look at my face, I'm going to be moving into my car. So I think, and I've also, by the way, introduced, the 2 bills on housing supply. I was the middle housing prime sponsor for the Senate last year. This year I had a conversion building, which is a sales and use tax exemption bill for converting commercial to residential, which is underutilized space for supply, and worked with Representative Fye on a transit-oriented development bill. So I'm very pro-supply. But as we build supply online, that's going to take 10 to 20 years. And the truth is, as we talk about the homelessness crisis, we know that we have to do everything we can to keep people housed. So unlike what you would consider traditional rent control in places like San Francisco or New York, we are not telling housing providers what to set their rent at. We're just saying, and the bill as it the House bill that moved in its final form, although it didn't pass, was it said in 1 year, 7%. You can raise your rent by 7%, and you have to give 6-month notice in order to do so. There were some other pieces in the legislation, as you mentioned, around late fees that I think were absolutely negotiable opportunities. Unfortunately, there really wasn't anyone from the landlord lobby, I guess, in the broadest sense, that came to the table to negotiate those issues. The bill also included a small resource center, which was actually based on feedback from small landlords in this community that I met with before session started. And I also want to address that having conversations with small landlords, including my in-laws, by the way, who are a true definition of mom and pop landlords, they both recognize that they can operate within their expenses and within their margins, but also want to ensure that they're getting paid rent on time and that their tenants are being able to meet that rent. So I think as we think about the entire problem in a real community way, we all have to be part of the solution. So not only do we need to keep people housed right now so that we don't end up also costing taxpayers a lot more money and trying to figure out how to rehouse people, but there's also the moral issue with that. When we hear from people who say our kids are getting ready for school in their cars, I think that's just an unacceptable reality. So I think we can chew gum and walk. And I think there's a lot of opportunity going into next session to negotiate and to talk about, what we can do on all of these fronts. So I would really encourage you. I'd love to have a discussion with you to see what's informing some of the perspective that you have and what you're looking at. For example, there was a report that came out debunking the Seattle accusation that some of the tenant protections, which are distinct from what we were proposing in state law, there's some overlap, but some pretty big distinctions, that actually was not the primary motivator for folks leaving the housing market. But these are all things that I think I'd love to have a conversation with you about. And as I mentioned, always welcome discussions with housing providers, developers, anybody working in this space, because it has to be all hands on deck. What's happening right now is just not an acceptable reality.
All right. And our next question comes from Bernal. Bernal has a question about Washington's part-time legislature. Go ahead, Bernal.
Hi. My question, listening to you all, you're a part-time legislature, but you're working full-time, and I'm wondering what can your constituents do to help you be better legislators, and would it be helpful for you to be full-time legislators?
I guess I'll start, and if one of my seatmates want to jump in. I mentioned earlier that there are real challenges with a part-time legislature. I think, especially depending on what your life circumstances afford you in terms of capacity. So for me, I'd love to see a full-time legislature. I could see where there would be, younger folks, probably more women, more parents that would be able to join and bring a lot of really important perspective. But, it takes, it's not just the outside pressure, unfortunately, unless it's on all legislatures, because in order to change that, we would need a 2/3 majority vote, and that's a very difficult thing to get across. But I will always be someone that is advocating very strongly for a full-time legislature, because I think we do a lot of work in a very short amount of time, and it would be great to have that opportunity just to engage with constituents throughout the year. But I don't know if my seatmates have a different perspective, and I respect whatever they might have to offer too.
Yeah, I think Senator Trudeau's made some good points in terms of allowing for people from all walks of life to be able to consider running for the legislature. There is a very big upside to that. On the other side of the coin, which I think probably matters less, is for people to have life experiences. And to be connected to the community also has its pluses. So I worked for 6 of the years as an employee of the government, and before I became a full-time legislator, and it was a real struggle. And I really understand the people who are trying to manage both the regular job plus the legislative job. So I lean towards Senator Trudeau's position that it should eventually become paid and expected to be a full-time occupation. People can get their practical experience first before they get in the legislature and can benefit from that. But I think there's really disadvantages that we don't have certain kind of people even consider being a legislator because they can't afford to do that.
The only thing that I'll add in is you actually have 3 legislators in the 27th who are full-time legislators, in the sense that we all work well over 40 hours a week on legislative issues. And all 3 of us, Jake was able to retire from his second job somewhere along the line here, but Senator Trudeau and I both have jobs that we go back to. So that's a lot to do. I guess I think in the best of all worlds, it would be great if every person in the world only had to work one job to make ends meet for their family. That's the goal that we should be setting for everybody. And so that leads me to say, yes, a full-time legislature. But I've often said this and been interviewed many, many times about this, that the fact that I need to work two jobs in order to make ends meet in a way, is what a lot of my constituents have to do. So I'm having the same experience that they are, and I think that does That is a good thing in a way. It's just that it's unfair to everybody. They shouldn't have to do that. I probably shouldn't have to do that. We should probably have a full-time legislature. It's very complicated to do it. It's nearly impossible, I think. But that said, I appreciate a question that focuses in on that for us.
All right. That is all the time we have tonight. Thank you for being part of this telephone town hall. If your question was not answered, please stay on the line. In just a moment, you'll have the opportunity to leave a voicemail, which the legislators will get. I'm going to turn it over to them to say a quick goodbye. And thanks, everybody, for a great call.
I'll start off again real quick and just say thanks again for joining us, everyone. The best thing I've had happen of late with regard to talking to constituents is running into somebody on the street and them talking to me about an issue that was complex. And I started to get out a business card to give them to email me. And he looked at me and said, I can talk to you any day on the street. I see you walking around all the time. So I'll have a chance to talk to you about that later. So if you see me, I try to walk to all my meetings in the interim if I can. If you see me walking somewhere, please say hello. And if you've got an issue you want to talk about, flag me down and we'll have a brief chat about it.
I just wanted to echo the gratitude, though, that the speaker put forward on everybody engaging, and to offer that, sometimes when we're asked questions about complicated issues, we're engaging directly on this teletown hall, but we may go back and be like, oh, my goodness, I wish there was something I could have said or that I didn't have available at my fingertips. So for anybody that felt like they wanted a deeper dive on an answer or wanted some more information about how we got to that answer, all I would ask is please reach out, please meet with us. We're very accessible and we're very open to having discussions even that are challenging. And I think that's one of the beauties of this delegation and working with my seatmates. So if there's anything here that wasn't answered or not answered with enough specificity, just please follow up. We'd love to be able to provide you that.
I appreciate the comments from my colleagues. We work as a team, and we all have our focus areas that we spend our time on. But you always should consider contacting our office and trying to get more deeper conversation. That's one of the benefits of the off session, so to speak, especially in my case where the legislature is the only work that I do. I relish the opportunity to talk longer with people and really have a depth of conversation rather than rushing through to the next appointment as we have to do during the legislative session to get our work done. So it's great to serve with my two colleagues, and I appreciate all the great questions. They were very valuable to hear from you.